Questions. I know that a lot of students are wondering about what this fall semester is going to be looking like. And so specifically in terms of each of the panelists, if you would answer basically two questions. Will you be teaching in person or online? And if you are teaching online, will it be synchronous or asynchronous? In teaching with the psychology department, I know that they are providing 3 different kinds of options: in person, hybrid, and online. And I think anyone who is going to be teaching online in the psych department will have the option of asynchronous teaching in combination with synchronous teaching. And I think many faculty in the psych department are very interested in ensuring that there is that combination of both synchronous and asynchronous. And by that, I mean live teaching and then some homework that you're accessing from the Blackboard website to watch some videos or take some assessments or submit on discussion boards and things like that. So I personally, in the psych department, haven't heard yet whether my class will be online or hybrid or remote, but I certainly will be doing a fair amount of synchronous work and some asynchronous work. Maybe Brian, since you are going to leave, we can hear from you.
Great, yeah, and I think Dr. Shatt, you gave a good introduction to what the possibilities look like for most courses at PACE this coming fall. I'll be teaching, and some people are calling it a hybrid model. There's actually a name for it. It's called HighFlex, and it was developed at San Francisco State University in around 2006. And the purpose was really to accommodate busy student schedules that some students had a hard time commuting in after a job. And so the course was offered both in person and online. At the time, it was kind of built around an in-person experience with an asynchronous online learning platform, which really kind of almost doubled the work for the faculty teaching it. The more modern version of it, and this is what some of the HighFlex courses, including my own, will look like at PACE, is having some students socially distant in the classroom, wearing their masks, and then the other students at home on the computer simultaneously. So just like we're doing Zoom right now, the faculty member will be at the front of the room and broadcasting the class to Zoom for students who are at home. And the students in person can also benefit from seeing the faculty member teach and work on the virtual whiteboard. I teach math, and so I rely heavily on a board to demonstrate some of the math and have students talk through the steps. And so I'll be using an iPad to teach so that it will broadcast to Zoom for the students at home and be on the screen at the front of the room for the students who are live. But I know some of my colleagues will be doing 100% from home through Zoom, like we did in the spring semester. And so I think those are the different models. Dr. Shatt mentioned asynchronous, which that would be like right now we use what's called the Blackboard learning system, and students can talk to each other on a discussion board. They can submit their work and interact with faculty and students through an online system. So I'll turn it over to the next panelist to talk about her fall semester.
Professor Fuentes Peralta or Professor Belen Santiago? Professor Fuentes Peralta?
Yeah, I can go. First, before talking about my semester, I just want to say I don't know if there is any international students here or any international students going to see this recording. I just want to say that I'm really, really sorry about the stress you might be right now after yesterday's announcement. I hope some things get solved soon. And as far as I know, there are going to be in-person classes at PACE. So be sure that some of us are going to be thinking or doing some efforts for you to accommodate and feel safe in our classes. Having said that, so far I'm going to be teaching 3 classes next fall. One is feminist research methods that was planned to be online, and I'm part of 2 learning communities. One is about women's rights, when we are going to be combining comparative politics, which is what I'm going to be teaching, with introduction to women's and gender studies. And I'm also part of another learning community where we are going to talk about intersectionality and psychology. So for that, I'm going to be teaching women's and gender race and class, sorry. Because of the way things have been developing, those 2 learning communities are going to be online. As Dr. Evans said, it's going to have synchronous and asynchronous components, meaning that sometimes there is going to be some things we are going to ask you to do or watch in advance to prepare for the discussion that is going to be synchronous. Sometimes that worked last time. And in some of our classes, the 2 faculty members are going to teach together. So that's something that is particular for learning communities that is going to happen there. We're going to have discussions where sometimes the professor is going to be there, just myself or the 2 professors. And the idea of these topics, because these classes are more based on discussion and the readings, what we are planning to do is to give you some discussion questions in advance or videos for you to watch. That way, when we discuss it, I explain the major concepts, but we all discuss together the questions you have in advance. So, Dr. Santiago.
Okay, I am going to be teaching asynchronous and synchronous. At first, I was open to, well, I kept on going back and forth, but ultimately what frames my decision is that my mother and I live together. My mother is 93 years old. So I have a concern, you know, for her and for me, but mostly for her, right? I need for her to be safe. But that said, the challenge is how to be as creative as possible online, right? So I think that that's the burden that's falling. It's not a burden, it's the challenge for all of us that are teaching this semester, how to be interesting, engaging, creative, and that's what I hope to do. So for the classes that we are, or that I'll be teaching are the Latino families, cross-cultural perspectives, as well as the African diaspora through film. So in all likelihood, students will be able, will watch the films on their own, like what Dr. Fuentes said, with some preset questions for students to think about. Especially we're applying a lot of our films to Latino critical race studies and critical race studies as well. So that will frame basically the semester. And let's see what happens, you know? So the burden is on me to make it engaging. So the pressure's on. And that's about it for now.
Great. We had one more panelist join in. Maybe Professor Godfrey, you might be able to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to give you a question to kick off the panel, if you don't mind. Right now we are talking about whether classes will be taught synchronously or asynchronously, in person or online. So intro, please, and maybe talk a little bit about your approach to your classes.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am Dr. Christopher Godfrey. I am one of the directors of the undergraduate program in psychology here at the New York City campus, and of one of the faculty across our various other graduate psychology programs. If you're going to be a major in psychology, then we're going to meet at some point. We are a major with two department with two majors, general psychology and applied psychology. You will encounter, you will, if you're going to be a major in psychology, then we will meet. Dr. Michelle Zaccario and I share responsibilities as both the directors and the advisors for our psychology majors, which is actually really great for all of our students, because it means that our students really have access to the two of us, who are not only making the program go and understanding how the major works, but also can really guide our majors along the process of whatever it is they're using their undergraduate work for to go on to whatever next step they're going on to. If you're not familiar, then psychology is a wonderful gateway to a number of disciplines. A good portion of our majors go on to graduate study in psychology, and I think one of the great things about our program is that you really do get exposure to the breadth of the field, since there are undergraduate, master's, and doctoral programs with students all working with faculty across those different programs. So for me, students typically see me but as a director, their advisor, and in the what do you call it? The culmination project that students have to do for the general psychology major as part of our experimental psychology sequence, which is it's a rare experience within undergrad psychology. It's a year-long course where students actually work with in small groups with faculty to develop a research project that they conceptualize and then ultimately present over the course of between the fall and spring semester. I've been a long time instructor in that course, along with several of my other colleagues. So I have the great pleasure of actually seeing our students at the very beginning, and then when they're finalizing their work within the major. You also encounter me in health psychology and in research methods, and then a bunch of other potential classes. The other thing that we really try and do, Dr. Zaccario and I really try and do, is make sure that we at least have a foot in all of our undergraduate courses, so we kind of know how they go. Depending on the semester, you might find me in any class from health psych to social psych to lifespan, depending on what we're trying to get a good understanding of in that semester. The other thing that I do that I think is as important as the academic side of our program is I am one of the advisors for our psychology club. So that is Psych-I and the Psychology Club. They are, it's part of the, if you're not familiar and if you're a psychology major, you can stop by you can stop by the department or visit the department virtually and get some more information about the Psychology Club at Psych-I. And again, Dr. Zaccario and I really try and be a part of, it's important for us to be, we think it's important for us to be a part of that student organization, so that we really try and build a bridge from or keep that bridge going between students and the department. I kind of think of my watchword as we're not so much interested in just getting you through a psychology program. We're interested in furthering our students' professional development. If you're a psychology major, it means that you're planning on doing something that's related to the field. So it's our job to kind of help young professionals develop. Dr. Shattuck, what else am I answering?
I think you covered a lot of great information. I want to ask another question of the panelists. And maybe Dr. Santiago, I can start with you, given that your role in the Office of Multicultural Affairs is particularly helpful. But given recent events, the racism, the anti-Black actions and sentiments that have been going on, that and also COVID, how do you see that impacting classes and the university, teaching the classes and also the university? I know that from a mental health perspective, I've got lots of thoughts and feelings about it, but maybe you can start out and I'll chime in a little bit later as well as other panel.
Okay, so I'll disagree with you a little, Dr. Shattuck. They're not recent events, right, of racism. These events have been ongoing since my very first day at the university. Racism, systemic racism is something that the university throughout all of its administrations has chosen not to deal with effectively. I think that the fear was if it was swept under the rug, that it would go away. And so that every season brings, a new crisis. I remember when I first started PACE, when Amadou Diallo was shot at 41 times. And that was about 20 years ago, right? And it's been, from there, Amadou Diallo, Trayvon Martin, as we move forward through time to those, names that a lot of the students now know. So the way in which this is different, though, is that through, because of the articulations of the Black Student Union and Student Government Association, collectively writing letters and getting faculty in support of student concerns, the university, the administration is taking to heed problems that have been longstanding within the context of the university. And so their voices are finally being heard, actions are being taken, more classes being offered, starting with the exploration of changing University 101, sometime in the near future, the curriculum, to other initiatives. I think that, what's happened this, past, in addition to COVID-19, that's the other thing, right? So, and I'm going to be a little long-winded, but when the revelation was made that Blacks and Latinos were dying in disproportionate numbers, I looked at my mother and I said, are they kidding? I mean, this is something that we know that the health disparities have been taking place in our communities for generations. So that this is an aha moment to the general public when Black and Latino and other communities of color have known this for a long time. One of the things that the university I found to be, accommodating was that we were more thoughtful than some of our other institutions in accommodating our students, in terms of not only the Zoom classes, but those students that needed to stay in res life for whatever reasons were able to do so. Unlike other universities, just asking everyone to leave in one fell swoop. But I'm hoping that our, I'm not really answering the question because it's such a loaded question. But the one thing that I need for our students to know is that we have a food pantry, right? When we talk about issues of insecurity. And one of the days, or I'm committed to going to the food pantry, to, distributing food. We're coming up with a schedule to address the issues of food insecurity on campus. I can say that the university administration, in answering your question, has participated in a workshop series called Academics for Black Lives, which is looking at systemic racism and, you know, coming up with strategies on how to break them down, you know, chisel, you know, away at them. And one last thing that I want to say is that the university is taking risks. The administration is taking risks that it hadn't taken in years past to use language that is more accurate. For example, I'll use the example of DJ Henry in the Pleasantville campus. Previous administrations called his demise the death. For the first time ever, this administration has called his passing a murder, which I think is, you know, addressing issues that concern Black students, Latino students squarely, you know, on the head. So I ask that students be a little patient with us, but to continue pushing the envelope as well, you know, because we just can't, if you stop pushing the envelope, I think that we will rest on our laurels once again and stay, you know, at a comfort level. That's it for now. I don't know if I answered your question though.
Absolutely, thank you. I know that Sully has a question. Do any of the panelists want to respond briefly before we jump to Sully's question?
I would like to hear her question first.
Certainly. All right. Sully, I've just asked you to unmute, if you can do that.
Hi, so Sully, she, her pronouns. This is a question for the counseling center. I was wondering if you guys have any counselors from a minority background, specifically Black counselors.
Great question. Yes, we do. We have a senior staff member who has been with us part-time for 3 years. She's now a senior staff member, which basically means a full-time staff member. And she identifies as such. And we, as I had mentioned earlier, we do also have trainees that work with us who are of color. This year, this current academic year, we do not have anyone. Last year, we had 2 other Black women on staff. It depends, it's a complicated process, but it depends on our match with various sites. We do also have a Latina who is working with us, a woman who identifies as LGBT. And we have some other visibly diverse staff coming in too. Other questions for any of the panelists from our students or comments?
I have a question. This was something that we had been talking about yesterday during our session with the students, but we wanted to know more about so we were talking about what our expectations were going into the fall. So something that came up was we wanted to know from the professor's perspective, what did they expect from us students for the fall semester? And anybody can answer that. I'm actually interested to know what each of you think.
So I'm curious.
Great.
I'm gonna answer with a question back to you, Nicole. Is that right? Yes. So Nicole, tell me what your concerns are. I'm going to answer your question, but I suspect that there's a concern under that I want to make sure I address.
There's no underlying concern. No, I think this question is just to get the professor's perspective for our incoming students. So how are they going to navigate being freshmen at pace while a lot of things are still under construction, like things are
sure.
They're trying to figure themselves out.
Sure. So I'm gonna tackle that question in part because I lead my faculty in psychology, my undergraduate faculty. So I won't say that I will speak for every faculty, for every professor. I can't do that. None of us can do that. But I think what we are all guided by, and I will tell you, it definitely is the instructions that we've given to, or ask that I've said to all of our faculty, is we're all in a state of transition going into the fall, and that how do we phrase it? That standards are the same, right? We work on having the same quality of education, and we want you to have that. At the same time, we all recognize and ask our folks to recognize that folks have different, especially for students, incoming students, are adapting to college. And that's one challenge that's heightened by this kind of new pattern of in-person, remote, hybrid, synchronous, asynchronous kind of learning, and people are going to be adapting to all different styles of classes. So the general advice is to be patient, be kind, keep your standards, right? Because otherwise, you as students, you don't know what the standard is for going in, right? So part of our responsibility is to help acclimate you to college. And if we just lower everything and go do whatever, then that doesn't benefit anyone. At the same time, it's a balance between that and understanding that coming to college is challenging. Adapting to college is challenging. You got a lot of new things being thrown at you. At the same time, you gotta meet this new thing, this new level of what's required. So what that looks like in every classroom is a little bit different. But I will go out on a limb and say that I think that faculty in general are very much aware that, particularly for this incoming class, this is not business as usual, and that we'll try our best to be as adaptive and I won't say accommodating, because I don't think you want that, and I don't think that we want to do that. I think our job is to actually help you adapt to actually this new environment. So there's some things that you should see that have been part of our learning curve. So in the same way that you're all adapting, I think the other thing I say to students is that this situation is new to us too. So anyone that says that they're familiar with this is not true. So if we can all be patient and kind with one another, then we'll all have a decent experience. So some things that you should see. And again, I can't speak for everyone, and I'm sure every class will run a little bit differently, but I think you'll find that your professors will probably try to engage you guys a little bit more just before the beginning of classes. So look out for emails from your professors asking you about just basic stuff like your name and what pronouns are you use, and if there's a name that you use that's not your given name, right? Because that's the case for a lot of us, right? We don't use our full name, we use something else, right? You'll see folks asking you about your technology, right? So it's our hope that you have technology to be able to access class, but we don't know unless we actually ask that question. So we'll be asking you stuff like that. I know that a lot of folks have something at their start of their class. I call it like my syllabus quiz, which is a great thing. It's not so much to like give you a grade, but it's to make sure that you get acclimated to using the learning management technology that is effectively all of our classes now, right? So you're going to encounter, it's not Blackboard, right? We're going to something else, right? By the time we all start, my colleagues, that's right. So whatever that is, I'm just forgetting what the name of that is. White space, right? So, oh, wow. That's a think through, huh? That's going to be interesting.
White space.
Wow, really? That honestly, that did not click for me until he just. Oh wow. Anyway, so we're all going to be learning how to operate in the new, I'm going to say it aloud, white space. See,
sorry,
weird.
no, a bright space.
Bright space.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. That's so much better. So fall 2020 is what we all hope to be. We want to make it a good experience for everyone, right? It's your opening year. And so that's really a guide. At the same time, it would be foolish for us to not acknowledge that this is weird and this is new. So the other thing I would encourage you all to do as new freshmen is, and I think I came in a little bit late, but I think this is what Dr. Santiago was saying, is the best thing that you can do is to make that contact with your professors as much as possible. I know that's hard, but it actually is one of the most important things that you can do. The students that have succeeded best in our program are the students that we're both, I and the student have made a connection, even if it's just a simple greeting at the beginning or end of class, that actually gets us through the more challenging parts of the semester and ultimately the more challenging parts of the student's experience. Both the good things and the bad things. So not just the good, not just the bad things, right? So I've had a lot of caffeine. So somebody else pick up this particular baton. Colleagues, what do you think?
I'd be happy to go if you don't mind, because I have to leave in a minute, so I could be very brief. I'm so sorry. I have a conflicting meeting running simultaneously, and I told them I'd come late. Thank you, Dr. Godfrey. Yeah, I completely will echo what Dr. Godfrey had said. And Dr. Godfrey, thank goodness it's Bright Space.
Oh my God, yes, so much better.
Bright Space is the company we're moving to. It's a new platform. I can actually tell the students why we're changing. The company Blackboard is changing their format, and in some of the early adopters of that format at Pace, we've gotten a lot of bad feedback that the new Blackboard is not very user-friendly. So the university investigated a competitor, and they found Brightspace was a little more intuitive for faculty and students to use. So that was the main reason we were switching learning platforms. I would say my expectations for students is it's the same expectation I have for myself and my colleagues, and that is for those who are going to be in the classroom. Safety is first and foremost in this environment. This is a unique year. And so everyone putting their masks on, everybody keeping their social distance and being respectful, as Dr. Godfrey said, and kind to one another and understanding during this difficult time. I had caught some of what Dr. Shatt had been saying in some of the media outlets about some of the stress that everybody's under. And so I think patience with one another is going to go a long way this year, more than ever. I mean, we should always be patient and kind, but knowing that everybody's going through so much right now, some more than others even. So I would say that kindness and that patience that Dr. Godfrey mentioned is critical. In terms of using the equipment, the remote equipment especially, I would say the same expectation again that I have for myself is to be timely with it, to be, to respond to emails in a timely manner. Again, continue being respectful and communicating with one another, especially if there are technology issues, connectivity issues. Not everybody has reliable Wi-Fi. So I think communication channels should be wide open from both faculty and students. So I would say my expectations for students are no different than I have for myself and my faculty members. So I hope that helps a little bit. But again, I'm so sorry I have to go. This is such a wonderful panel, wonderful students, and wonderful members on the team here. So I want to wish everybody my very best, and be safe and well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. And I'm going to reiterate, as he said that, communicate, communicate, communicate. If you don't communicate, your faculty don't know what's going on with you. So communicate with them.
So Ken, since you just said that, I, like to also add that I think that the faculty sets the tone for the class. And depending on what, and we all have stories as faculty. Some of us like are first generation, you know, faculty. Some of us have become faculty by the skin of our teeth because of the struggles that we've, you know, faced. So that means that the expectation for me to you is to convey an openness, right? To have even more open spaces via Zoom so that we can meet one-on-one, just in case you are experiencing difficulties, right? And we typically don't know each other, students, but there has to be an element of trust that I think that the professor needs to convey, and, you know, and to share themselves, of their background, so that this way there's a sense of comfort. But the other expectation, which I found to be quite interesting, that happened to me last semester, I had one student that insisted on doing yoga stretches while in class, you know, like while on Zoom. And my position is, my code of conduct, you know, or my expectation of you is that you will, you know, be part of this class in a way that's similar to the classroom in some kind of way, right? That you know, that you're not doing stretches, that you're not doing all kinds of, you know, things that I'm like, are you serious, right? But, you know, aside from that, is the, you know, like the whole issue of keeping an open line of communication. And not only that, it's the importance of getting to know all of your professors. I think that is so, you know, relatively, you know, it's so important. For example, I came of age during the 1960s, and during that time, getting to know your professors was seen as brown nosing, right? That like you just wanted to like, you know, like get it in good with the professor. So that I think that the expectation for me is for students to, for us to get to know each other, so that in the event at some point you need a letter of recommendation for grad school, for an internship, for employment opportunities, we've taken the time to cultivate a relationship throughout the course of the semester, if not the academic year, so that I will be equipped to provide you with that service. And that's basically it, just to maintain an open line of communication. Pamela?
Yeah, I don't want to
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I don't want to sound repetitive, but yeah, I think that that's important, that you communicate with us. I always tell my students, and I think this time I'm going to say that more often. If you are facing some kind of challenge, the earlier you tell me, the earlier we can solve it together. If you let me know at the beginning of the semester or some weeks in advance before the assignment is due, we can do something so this works out for everybody. If you're a multilingual student or English is not your first language, we can work on that in case you have to write an essay, or I can direct you to the resources. Or I always tell my students, let me know in advance and we can solve it. But because if you let us know 24 hours before the assignment is due, it's really complicated. So that's one of the expectations I would have as part of the communication. Check the deadlines in advance. Don't be afraid to ask any questions in advance. And in case you are shy when you participate in class, take this opportunity of online classes to send the homework. I've seen several of my students that they rather write the participations. Ask your professors if you can do that, and that way we know you better. And sometimes I ask my students, hey, do you mind if I talk a little bit about what you said? I bring it to the conversation if the student feels comfortable. And some of them say, yes, I would like to hear what other students think about that, but I would like to remain anonymous, or just mention my name. So let us know in advance any challenges you might have, so we can work on that with you.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that's true for any sort of mental health difficulties that someone may have. The earlier you come in to the counseling center or talk with family or friends or you know, maybe a professor, the easier it is to solve those kinds of concerns. Other questions from our students?
While you guys are thinking, I'm going to add on to something Dr. Fuentes said, and that is, and it's wonderful as she was talking, I looked, you know, we talk about student participation and students often think that means raising your hand. When I've taught, I always look at student engagement. Who is engaged in class? As I'm looking at the screen right now, I can tell who is engaged and who is listening. So a student who's looking at you in a classroom, who may be introverted and is uncomfortable speaking in class, but is following you constantly and is able to respond, whether via email or doing good work, that's an engaged student. So in a sense, from my perspective, they've always been participating. Whereas a student who just occasionally raises their hand, but is doing homework is not someone who's engaged. So I think that's important to remember as well, because that's going to be challenging as we're online to do other things.
Thank you. That's an important distinction. Any questions or comments from our students? Do any of the faculty like to provide any final comments to our students?
So I just wanted to say, and this is so true of any other time, but even more so this past semester and this coming semester as well. You are living such an important part of history at this particular moment in terms of the pandemic, in terms of things that have been uncovered, you know, inequities that have been uncovered, in terms of new ways of learning and living and interacting with each other. And I encourage you to document your experiences, whether through photography, whether through journaling, any kind of, you know, creative modes as possible, so that, you know, this will be a living document that you have, you know, and you can share this, look back on it, maybe 5 years from now, or share it should you decide to have children or with your nieces and nephews. But if you haven't started doing that, you know, not the expectation, the hope is that you start doing this, you know. And as it was said before, to be kind to each other and to be patient with each other as well. Family members, siblings, of course, that get on your nerve, your professors, and, you know, the people at the bodega, anyone and everyone.
Yeah, more than a question and just listening to what Soli was saying, just engage with clubs, engage with other students that might have similar interests. You might hear about them in the classroom. You might hear about these fabulous clubs that are there. These are going to be your company for some time, or you can just band with other students. So really engage. You can build. If something it has impacted me during these past weeks is the solidarity and the I'm amazed, and I'm using this word like in all sense, with the activism of students at PACE. That's something that has amazed me since day one when I joined. So make those partnerships. I think there are a lot of resources there.
And I will add one thing to that. You know, I think I told everybody when I emailed you over the weekend to make sure you set up your Zoom accounts with PACE. When we went online back in April, the head of IT said, you can use the Zoom for PACE. You pay for it, by the way. You pay for it with your tuition. Use it for whatever. He was really very nice. And he said, go out. So you guys all have access to PACE's Zoom. This is a great opportunity. I mean, there's a small number of you here, but there's no reason you can't reach out to each other and say, hey, let's get together and play a game. There are tons of online games now that you can play. And I will say that I have reconnected and I've grown some friendships with people simply because, you know, you don't have to worry about other things. You can't go anywhere. So you know what? Get on Zoom and connect with friends. You know, it's a different way to do things. But, or as Dr. Santiago said, you know, instead of looking at this as a terrible because things are changing, celebrate the fact that there are lots of new opportunities. The world is always changing. You're living through, although it's terrifying, there's some very exciting things, hopefully, that will come out of this. Think positive.
Folks, unfortunately, I have to leave to go and teach a class. So welcome. I know none of you are psych majors, but, you know, give us some time, we'll convert you. Welcome aboard.